Today we are diving into the emotional and tumultuous journey of a young man named Elias. His story begins in the comforting yet bewildering surroundings of a small-town auto repair shop, a place where his family's expectations and his dreams collide. Growing up, Elias had always been enchanted by engines, the intricate machinery whispering secrets only he seemed to hear. He could effortlessly troubleshoot problems that left others scratching their heads. However, this natural affinity for engines was overshadowed by a relentless criticism from his father, Sterling, who branded him too dreamy for the practical work that was expected of him. This constant dismissal planted seeds of doubt in young Elias, leading him to believe that perhaps he was destined for simple manual labor, a life far removed from the vibrant dreams blossoming in his mind. In this house, praise was lavished upon his younger brother Leo, the self-proclaimed heir to the family business. Leo's conformity and practicality were celebrated, while Elias, despite his evident talents, found himself relegated to the role of the family scapegoat. He would endure the belittling jokes at family dinners and hear his father's insults, sharp yet wrapped in the guise of humor, inflicting wounds that ran deep. It was a classic dynamic: Sterling, the domineering patriarch, Leo the favored son, and Elias forever seeking approval and love in an environment where those emotions were often withheld. Amidst this emotional turmoil, Elias often turned to his mother, Sylvia, for solace. Unfortunately, Sylvia was overwhelmed and passive, rarely intervening in Sterling's reign of emotional manipulation. Her tendency to dismiss Elias's pain as mere oversensitivity left him feeling isolated within the very walls that were supposed to provide him shelter. This emotional neglect entrenched a growing chasm between him and the world outside, a gap that would only widen as time went on. One sweltering summer in the early 2000s, the family embarked on a trip through the Southwest, a road trip Elias had dreaded since the moment it was announced. They were headed to a distant cousin's graduation ceremony, but to Elias it felt more like an expedition into his own personal hell. Tensions simmered beneath the surface as they drove through endless stretches of dusty desert highways, punctuated by the relentless jabs from his father and the snickers from Leo. Each mile felt like a countdown to an uncomfortable confrontation, a reminder of his perceived inadequacies. "Why can you never take things seriously, Elias?" Sterling would bark as Elias gazed out of the window, lost in thought about the engines he would one day love to rebuild, or the places he could escape to, if only he had the courage. As the car rattled along the bumpy road, Elias found himself withdrawn, battling feelings of inferiority while clinging tightly to the hope that perhaps someday he would discover a world beyond this one, if only he could find the strength to break free. With the anticipation of the graduation looming in the background, the atmosphere simmered with frustration and unspoken fears. Each member of the family carried their own burdens, but for Elias, the weight felt particularly crushing. Internally, he wrestled with the daunting realization that his dreams often seemed too far-fetched for even himself to believe in. He could only watch as life passed him by, feeling more like a spectator than a participant in his own story. This trip, meant to bond their family, instead illuminated the cracks in their relationships, cracks that would soon begin to expose a much darker truth. As they pulled into a remote gas station in rural Arizona for a brief stop, Elias felt a sense of both relief and dread. The prospect of relief from the car was overshadowed by the knowledge that being outside would only mean facing further critique. It was during this moment, as he stepped inside to grab a cold drink, a small act he thought would allow him a brief respite from the tension, when his entire world began to unravel. Little did he know that this seemingly mundane stop would serve as the catalyst for a series of events that would change the trajectory of his life forever. Elias remained blissfully unaware as he picked out a soda, his mind drifting to thoughts of escape and freedom. Outside, the laughter of his family faded into the background, only to be replaced by an excruciating silence that would echo throughout his life. As the exit door swung shut behind him, his heart thudded heavily in his chest, unaware of the pivotal moment that awaited him just outside. In every life story, certain moments stand out, drastically altering the course of one's life. In the case of Elias, that moment arrived unexpectedly, buried beneath layers of youthful optimism and the heavy burden of familial neglect. The day began innocently enough, under the piercing sun of an Arizona afternoon, during a family road trip that seemed destined to be a series of uncomfortable conversations and biting remarks. Little did Elias know, this trip would mark the beginning of his transformative journey, a journey that would take him from despair to self-discovery. Elias stepped inside a dusty gas station, the kind found in the middle of nowhere, a brief escape from the oppressive heat and the tension of the car ride. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, nearly drowning out the faint sound of classic rock playing from a small radio in the corner. He wandered down the aisles, letting his fingers graze the cool glass of soda bottles, momentarily lost in a world of endless possibilities flavored by his favorite sugary drinks. It was a chance to take a shallow breath of freedom, to revel in the lightness of childhood indulgences, albeit briefly. The anticipation of a cold drink elevated his spirits. He could escape the looming shadows of his family's disparagement for just a moment longer. As he approached the register, he could not shake off the feeling of being an outsider, even in this moment of trivial normalcy. He could feel the air growing thick with grief, a familiar suffocation wrought by an external family dynamic that was so far removed from his desires and dreams. Upon paying for his drink, he emerged into the blistering daylight, feeling a fleeting sense of exhilaration. But that exhilaration quickly evaporated as he looked toward the parking lot and noticed something unsettling. The family car, a battered but dependable vehicle, was slowly turning onto the highway and disappearing into the horizon. In disbelief, he rubbed his eyes, hoping this was some cruel joke, a step in a surreal road trip montage he had seen in movies. But as the car continued to vanish, reality dawned on him like the brutal sun above. They were not coming back for him. Panic surged through Elias's veins as he grappled with the stark realization that this was not an accidental oversight. He felt wholly, inexplicably abandoned. No hope flickered in his chest as he scanned the desolate surroundings, the relentless Arizona sun beating down on his shoulders, a furious reminder of his reality. He was alone, utterly, horrifyingly alone, stranded in an unfamiliar place with no means of communication, mere cash in his pocket, and no ticket back to safety. Elias's mind spiraled into chaos, thoughts racing as he replayed years of emotional neglect and belittlement by his father Sterling and brother, Leo. Each of those derisive comments echoed in his ears, a haunting chorus reminding him of his worthlessness, of being the family scapegoat. "You are too dreamy, Elias," Sterling would say, his voice a cold dagger that cut down any budding aspirations. "You need to know the value of real work." The irony of being left behind at a gas station did not escape him. In that moment of bleak vulnerability, the years of being pushed aside and mocked by his family crystallized into an undeniable truth. He was more than their punchline, more than the soul deemed too impractical to dream. It was a revelation that simultaneously thrilled and terrified him. Would he ever escape this seemingly eternal shadow? As the sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the asphalt, Elias weighed his options. He could succumb to despair or take action. With the adrenaline coursing through him, he made a decisive choice. He would not let this be the end. No longer would he subject himself, passively enduring a life dictated by others. In his quiet fury, a flicker of resolve ignited within him. He would find a way to forge a new path to reclaim his story. After hours of sitting on the roadside, the weight of abandonment hardened into a fierce determination. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, leaving behind an expanse of indigo and despair. He took a deep breath, filled with the grit of survival instinct. He was alone but not defeated. Elias dashed to the highway, seeking help, his heart pounding with the desperate thrill of navigating into the unknown. Whether it meant hitchhiking or relying on the kindness of strangers, Elias was ready to reclaim the destiny that had been so cruelly stripped from him. With every step, he felt himself shedding the childhood insecurities that had plagued him for so long. He would no longer reside in the margins of his family's expectations. Instead, he would embrace the vastness of possibility that lay ahead. This was not merely a journey to a new town. It was a pilgrimage towards self-acceptance, autonomy, and the reinvention of Elias, who was stronger than his past had ever led him to believe. As the first hints of dawn broke over the Arizona horizon, stretching light across the desert landscape, Elias found himself on the brink of a new beginning. The emotional weight of being abandoned by the one group he had sought to please began to disperse, replaced by an urgent motivation to carve out a life for himself. The anger and betrayal that had marinated within him now served as the fuel propelling him toward an uncertain future. This moment marked a turning point. He was no longer a mere passenger in his life. Elias was ready to steer his own course. Elias's initial steps were fueled by a combination of desperation and determination. He thumbed for a ride on the highway, a simple action that would take everything he had learned, every moment he had suffered, and transform it into a daring venture into the unknown. He understood that this was not merely about getting from point A to point B, it was about embracing the possibility that life could be different from what he had known. When a kind-hearted long-haul truck driver stopped to offer him a lift, Elias felt an unexpected surge of hope. It was the first sign that the world might hold kindness for him after all. The road to Flagstaff unwound beneath them, a tapestry of distant mountains and arid plains painting the backdrop for his newfound journey. During the drive, Elias shared bits of his story with the trucker, a stranger who listened carefully, acknowledging the resilience emanating from the young man's gaze. They exchanged stories of their lives, and with every anecdote, Elias felt the shackles of his past slowly breaking away. He was more than the punchline of his family's jokes. He was a survivor with dreams that dared to stretch beyond the confines of what others had deemed impossible. Upon arriving in Flagstaff, Elias faced the next daunting challenge: survival. He sought out a community outreach center, the most hopeful place he could think of to gather the resources he desperately needed. It felt surreal walking through those doors, the unfamiliar environment, a mix of anxiety and possibility. There, a kind-hearted volunteer named Sarah greeted him. She recognized the vulnerability in his eyes, but also the flickers of determination that hinted at the strength residing just beneath the surface. With Sarah's assistance, Elias began the painstaking process of obtaining a temporary identification card, filing for a social security number, and accessing the myriad resources available to someone in his position, a journey for which he had been ill-prepared just a night before. Each form he filled out was a step toward claiming his identity, an act of defiance against the life once dictated by others. As he navigated this new realm, he began to envision the possibilities that lay ahead, ones that spoke to his ambitions and captured his dreams, undeterred by the noise of his past. In the days that followed, Elias secured a job as a kitchen assistant and line cook at a quaint local cafe called the Rusty Spoon. Martha, the owner, was a no-nonsense woman with a heart of gold who recognized the quiet determination behind Elias's eyes. He applied himself wholeheartedly, soaking up everything he could learn in the kitchen. The heat of the stove and the rhythm of preparing orders became a cathartic outlet, allowing him to channel his energy into something constructive and fulfilling. Every dish he plated felt like a small victory against the backdrop of everything he had overcome. As months passed, Elias saved every dollar from his paycheck. He was meticulous, prioritizing even the simplest things, like securing a small, humble room in a shared house near the cafe. Independence was not about extravagance for him. It was about reclaiming his autonomy, creating a space that resembled a home for the first time in years. With the purchase of a basic prepaid mobile phone, he felt a renewed connection to the world, a vital link to people he would meet and opportunities yet to come. Each evening after work, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in colors of hope, Elias reflected on how far he had come. What once felt like a relentless chain of disapproval had morphed into an exhilarating journey of self-discovery and resilience. Toward every new day, the weight of his past did not disappear entirely, but he recognized it as a part of his story, a story he would now narrate on his terms. Elias was more than just a young man building a new life from scratch. He was a testament to the power of choice, a reminder that people have the ability to shape their destinies, even when emerging from shadows of despair. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but Elias's heart swelled with the knowledge that he was no longer defined by his family's rejection. He was about to embrace a life that was rewarding and fulfilling, one where he could dream, strive, and thrive without limitations. Elias stared at the flickering screen of the payphone, the hum of the rural Arizona air buzzing in his ears, interspersed with the distant sounds of cars passing on the highway. He was in an odd mix of agony and resolve, each ring of the phone vibrating through his chest like a warning bell. His mother, Sylvia's voice, was a familiar echo, now tinged with something unsettling. She had left a message on the outreach center's landline, her tone laced with feigned concern, insisting that the recent events had all been a misunderstanding. It was just a joke, Elias. Your father thought it would teach you responsibility. Like a lesson wrapped up in a joke. You know how he is, she assured, the trappings of her voice reflecting years of evasive reasoning. In the background, Elias could faintly hear Sterling's grumbling voice reprimanding her to keep the situation under control, while Leo's laughter, mocking and carefree, sliced through the static of the call. That laughter, so often aimed at him, at his dreams, now sparked something deep within Elias, a quiet fury, a strength he had not yet fully recognized. As he stared at the phone, the weight of his past, the years of being the scapegoat, the punching bag for his father's frustrations, coiled around him. It felt familiar, constricting, but there was also a sharp clarity cutting through the fog. He had spent too long trying to conform, to fit into a mold carved out by Sterling's unyielding belief that aspiration was folly. They had cast him aside, and now they sought to manipulate him again, to tug on his heartstrings and reel him back into their toxic orbit. But Elias was no longer that uncertain boy left in the dust. He had forged his way through the flames of abandonment, emerging self-sufficient and determined. He had fought for stability and purpose in Flagstaff, and now everything hinged on whether he would continue to allow his family to wield power over him, power they had not earned and did not deserve. With a deep breath, he picked up the payphone's receiver, his pulse quickening with every passing second. The distance between their beliefs and his newfound conviction felt monumental. When Sylvia's voice came through, he interrupted her before she could launch into another round of insincere pleading. "Hello, Mom. You wanted to know if I could stand on my own 2 feet. Well, now you will watch me run." The weight of those words hung in the air, heavy and full of promise. He hung up before she could respond, a firm click resounding in his mind like the slamming of an iron door. Elias allowed himself a breath, a moment to release the still festering ties that bound him to their manipulation. He had already changed his prepaid phone number, an act he planned to solidify with every new direction his life would take. In the following days, he dove deeper into his work at the Rusty Spoon, a bustling cafe that had become a sanctuary for his rebirth. Elias thrived in the kitchen under Martha's watchful eye, learning the nuances of culinary technique while commanding the lunch rush with a zeal that surprised even him. The rhythm of the kitchen pulsed like a heartbeat beneath the surface of the doubts his past had inflicted. He dedicated every ounce of his newfound energy to navigating through the chaos and choreography of orders, seasoning and sautéing his way towards self-empowerment. Every paycheck received was not merely a means of survival, it was a hard-fought symbol of his independence. Each time he carefully stowed away a few dollars, it signified progress, his groundwork for a stable future. Elias saved diligently, prioritizing essentials while dreaming quietly of a time when he would no longer need to scrape by. Eventually, he purchased a basic prepaid mobile phone, reveling in the feeling of connection to a world that had seemingly forgotten him. It was more than just a communication device, it was the first step toward engaging with life on his own terms. But just when the tranquility began to take a firm hold on his days in Flagstaff, the specter of his former life loomed closer. It was one of those moments where the past seemed destined to rear its ugly head at the most inconvenient times. He received an unexpected call. The cost of leaving his biological family behind would echo throughout the years. Just over a year after he severed ties, Elias learned quite by accident that his great-aunt Eleanor had passed away. The only family member who ever provided him with genuine support and kindness, Eleanor's loss came as an indescribable blow. The absence of her nurturing presence now felt amplified by the silence of his estranged family. Feeling sprigs of compassion mixed with sorrow, Elias searched for ways to honor her memory. A simple flower arrangement, a lavish display no less, lipstick the wall of a shared communal space at the funeral home where she would be laid to rest. Yet this small act of gratitude, shrouded in layers of anonymity, ultimately became a catalyst for the tension brewing between him and the remnants of his biological family. The flowers raised brows and sparked hushed speculation among the attendees, including his estranged family members. Curiosity wrapped around his actions like a mist, sending ripples of unease through Sterling, Sylvia, and Leo, who had yearned to dismiss his existence but would now remember it. The moment was bittersweet, a disconnected gesture sowing seeds of remembrance about the son they abandoned on a dusty roadside. Yet peace was fleeting, and the fluctuations of their lives intertwined with that uneasy sense of anticipation. The door had been opened. They could sense his presence still lingered, even in the shadows. A curious friend from the past soon ventured to locate him, delving into searches that felt invasive, the digital traces of a history he had worked so hard to bury. Elias experienced an acute rush of anxiety in facing the specter of his past as the rumors of his successful trajectory began to dance around him. He found it essential to seek legal counsel regarding matters of privacy and security, tightening the fortifications he had erected around his new life. Additionally, Martha, supportive and wise, became a confidant during this period of turmoil. He buried himself deeper within his culinary tasks, pouring his heart into the food he prepared, a way to channel the roiling emotions that bubbled beneath the surface. The kitchen became his sanctuary, a place where the past eventually faded against the savory scents and sizzling sounds of his present life. The prospect of a future awaited him, filled with dreams he had only begun to whisper into existence against a background of warmth and kindness. The sparks of hope continually reminded him that while the past had tried to snare him once again, there was no room for old shackles in a life defined by his own making. Elias would continue forward and write the narrative on his terms. More importantly, he would tread this path free from the shadows of yesterday, ready to cement the foundation of a life worth living, full of unyielding hope and resilience. Elias stood at the bustling counter of the daily grind, the second cafe he had opened under Martha's guidance, and marveled at how far he had come. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee swirled around him like a comforting embrace, grounding him in the moment. Here he was not just a survivor of his past, but a thriving entrepreneur, a dedicated leader respected by his team and patrons alike. It was a far cry from the emotional turmoil of his childhood, when he was constantly scrutinized and belittled by his family. Now he was setting the narrative for his own journey. In the years that followed his escape from the clutches of his childhood home, Elias had focused all his energy on creating a life of fulfillment and independence. He poured himself into his work, moving from line cook to assistant manager, cultivating skills in culinary arts, budgeting, and leadership. Every shift served as a reminder of the dreams he had carried within him, dreams long suppressed by the weight of familial expectations. By the time he was 7 years post-abandonment, he had enrolled in night classes for hospitality management, eager to sharpen his business acumen. His relationship with Martha had evolved too. She became not merely a mentor but like the mother figure he never had, encouraging his ambitions and sharing in his victories. With her encouragement, he boldly proposed the idea of a second location, a venture that he believed would serve the community while elevating his standing in the culinary world. The vision came alive as they worked together, defining the atmosphere and menu of the daily grind. Martha's unwavering support ignited a fire in him. As business flourished, so did his personal life. It was during one of his shifts at the Rusty Spoon that he first met Chloe. She stepped in with confidence, her radiant smile matched only by the creative energy emanating from her as she discussed architecture with a group of customers. Elias was captivated. In their conversations, he found a partner who understood ambition and nurtured dreams. Their relationship blossomed amidst the bustling cafe, both finding common ground in their aspirations. Years later, they committed to building a life together, choosing to marry in a small ceremony surrounded by close friends, including Ben, a former co-worker and confidant who had become like family. The day radiated love and acceptance, the kind Elias had long craved but never found in his biological family. On that special day, surrounded by Chloe's lively family, he felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. It was a stark contrast to the isolated childhood he had experienced, the joyous laughter resonating in a way that felt genuinely warm and inviting. As their family grew, so did Elias's responsibilities and joys. With the arrival of their first child, Maya, followed by Finn, he recognized that he was no longer just forging a life for himself, but building a legacy for his children. He embraced fatherhood with enthusiasm, determined to create a home filled with love, understanding, and encouragement. He often reminisced about his tumultuous childhood, reminded of the need to foster an environment vastly different from the one he had known. Despite the successful business ventures and loving family, Echoes of his past still lingered, albeit in an unconventional manner. It had been a few years since his great-aunt Eleanor passed away, the one family member who had genuinely cared for him. On the surface, her absence should have felt heavy, but he had chosen to carry her memory with compassion. Upon learning of her passing, he felt the urge to honor her quietly. The floral arrangement he sent to her funeral spoke volumes, serving as a muted yet powerful symbol of the esteem he held for her unwavering affection throughout his childhood. However, turbulent waves were never too far away. A few years into his success, an old acquaintance attempted to reach him, the digital world now rife with possibilities. As social media emerged, stories began to spread, and before he knew it, whispers about his achievements trickled through the network towards his estranged family. The unsettling notion of their rekindling interest brought unease to Elias's once comfortable life. He realized the need to protect his newfound grace, taking discreet steps to ensure that his past would not intrude into the life he had built with Chloe and their children. Despite the anxiety, Elias remained resolute. Along with Martha, he consulted legal services about securing his privacy and managing unexpected encounters. He fortified the efforts he had taken during the years to maintain his autonomy, ensuring his family's shadow would cast no gloom on the joys he had discovered as an adult. In many moments of vulnerability, he sought solace in the aromas of coffee at the daily grind, the complexities of his work serving as a therapeutic balm against the past tremors. As time moved forward, so did Elias. He ended up overseeing both cafe locations, implementing new strategies to elevate the overall experience for their customers. Now, with years of growth behind him, he analyzed every aspect, driven not merely by profit, but by a desire to create spaces where others could gather, feel welcome, and share moments that would echo off vibrant walls adorned with art and community stories. In this life, he had finally found harmony, a stark leap from the chaos of the familial shadows that once threatened to drown him. He cherished every smile, every shared moment with Chloe, Maya, and Finn, encasing them in memories that could not be marred by the past. Regardless of how his biological family faltered over the years, struggling with personal setbacks and pain, he had carved a path into the future, fiercely determined to craft a brighter legacy for his beloved family. Elias's story was not just one of survival. It was a tale of transformation and relentless pursuit of joy. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Elias's life story. If you were moved or inspired by his journey of resilience and growth, please give this video a thumbs up and share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a challenge that felt insurmountable? I would love to hear about your experiences. Remember to subscribe for more heartfelt stories and inspiring content that can uplift and empower you in your own journey. Until next time, keep believing, keep striving, and embrace the life you truly deserve. See you in the next video.